Hi everybody, it's Connie again, and I am wanting to show you embossing today. Embossing is a kind of paper crafting, and there's two different ways to emboss. One is when you use embossing folders or something to push an image into paper and make it raised. The other way is heat embossing, and that is what I want to show you today because a lot of people have never tried it and don't know how to get started. It's not a very expensive thing to start. You don't need very much, but there are a lot of possibilities. So in the current catalog on page 52, basically this is what you need. You need paper, you need powder, a wet ink, and a heating device. Or sometimes in the olden days when I was really cheap, I used my toaster oven. So as long as something is hot enough to melt the powder. I'm not talking about a blow dryer. This is a heat tool that is made by Ranger. It is really hot. If you had one of the wallpaper strippers, a lot of people used to use those before they made these available in craft stores. So that's a possibility too. Just remember, they get extremely hot. So I just want to show you also while I'm on this page that there are also embossing pens. These are inks that are so wet that they don't dry right away. You can sprinkle the powder on and write with them, and that is a lot of fun. So I just wanted to show you that. The other thing I wanted to show you is when you look at the colors that are available, all of the different colors from Close to My Heart come with, the cardstock and the re-inkers and the dye ink pad. But notice that they all also come as a pigment ink pad. And the reason I want to point that out to you is because it takes a super wet pigment style ink in order to emboss. So, for example, if you used a dye ink, it would dry so fast that you would not be able to take the time to sprinkle the powders on. These are some of the powders that come in little jars like this. Sometimes I will dump the jar into a little Tupperware type container like this one. I put the gold powder in and I use like spoons so that it's just easier for me. The other thing when you're going to emboss is you want to have a way to dump the excess powder back into the containers. So I use just a piece of typing type paper, copy paper. So let me show you a couple of things. I think the most dramatic way to emboss is using a clear ink and a color like a metallic. You don't need to have a clear ink. You could use any color ink. Whatever color your powder is what it will look like. So for example, I have this Christmas stamp. You'll notice that the ink on a pigment pad is very thick, and a lot of people have a tendency it's spongy, so they smush it down real hard and it gets into all the little grooves, and sometimes that'll give you a muddy image. So I try to be really careful and just tap it gently on there, just enough to get good coverage on your stamp. And then we're going to ink it up onto the paper. And you'll notice the ink is wet. You can see that it is shiny and wet. So if I put my powder on, it will stick wherever the ink is wet, right? And notice you don't see any more red. Everything is gold. So that red ink, it didn't matter if I used purple, blue, clear, or whatever. It's going to show up the color of your powder. So I want to show you, this heat tool might be a little loud, but this is definitely one of the softer heat tools I've ever used. And basically what I'm going to do is put some heat on here. It's kind of magical when it starts to melt. I usually try to heat it kind of all over first, and sometimes I'll even go on the underside of the cardstock, and you can kind of see it turning. The powder, as it melts, gets nice and shiny, and it changes from that dull to a bright, and it's so beautiful. So you can imagine how that would look, on like a Christmas card or something, because there's not much work to it. It looks like I need to melt that a little bit more, but really pretty nice, right? Now, the other thought is, what if I wanted to do red on red? A lot of times, instead of using the pigment inks, I like the Versamark water stamp ink. You can't see it, but it's on there, and it's pretty wet. I'm going to stamp that little present. You can kind of see that it is stamped on there. I'm going to put red powder on it, and then the excess I'm just going to put on my little extra piece of paper. Now I'm going to set that aside for a moment, and I'm going to dump this excess back into the container. So you can see where this is going to last me a really long time. This ink and this powder, I could do this all day and not even use a little bit of it. So, sorry, this is really hot. Okay, let's do the red. The red is not quite as dramatic as the gold when it melts. When the gold melts, it's like, wow. That's why I like people to start with a metallic, like a gold or silver. But you can see it's shiny and it's raised. These are raised images. You can feel them on your paper. And when you go to color later on, it's almost like you have an outline that keeps you from going outside of the lines. It's really kind of neat to have that raised image. Okay, I don't know why I'm showing that to you upside down. I'm a dork. Okay, let's see. What else was I going to show you? The other thing is the clear powder. So this is the other thing I wanted to show you. So if there is a clear embossing powder, it looks like it's white, but it's not. It's clear. And whatever image you want, you use a colored ink. If you use a clear ink and use clear powder, it's going to be clear. A lot of people use that when they're doing art journaling or tone-on-tone kinds of things. I can show that to you. Let's stamp this one in green. And then put a little clear powder on it. And then let me also, pardon me, stamp this in clear, so I'll get out my clear pad. And you can see it's kind of left a little tree watermark on there with clear powder. I'm going to dump that off. And I'm going to tap the excess into the jar. Okay, and now I'm going to heat the images I just stamped. Sorry, took me a second. I set them down, walked away. Okay, so this will take a moment. There is the green ink with clear. Okay. And there's the clear ink with clear. All right, so if I put this so you can kind of see the differences. There you can kind of see it. So the green tree looks green, but it has a shiny covering on it. And then the clear ink looks more like tone-on-tone stamping, but it's raised and embossed. It looks really cool. So those are different ways to emboss. The last thing I want to show you is this static remover, because one of the things that is a problem when you emboss is that, I'm going to get my clear ink again. One of the problems is that when you sprinkle this gold powder, it's hard to see, but there's a little halo of gold around there. And sometimes the powder will even stick inside of the lines where you don't want it to. And so this is that anti-static pouch that I've shown before, and it puts like a layer of basically cornstarch on there. Also, you could use baby powder. But the difference is, now I don't have that halo of gold on there at all. You can see where the cornstarch is. But once this is melted, you will not see any of that. That's easy to brush off. One last time, I'm going to heat this up. You can kind of see it start to melt. I feel like embossing comes and goes, and some of my supplies are probably 20 years old, but they still work great. So every now and then I just kind of pull them out and make a bunch of cards. Isn't that neat? And then you can wipe off any excess afterwards. Cool, right? I just think those turned out really nice. All right, let me know if you have any questions. I hope this helped.